I want to speak to you about what it means to worship in spirit. You see, the greatest thing you'll ever do is to do what you were created to do. And what is that? Jesus said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and to love your neighbors yourself. And so those two things, all of the law, all of the prophets, can be really summarized in those two things: loving God and loving people. And when you learn to worship God, you are expressing your love for Him, how much you love for Him. And it's important that we worship in spirit. You know, Jesus was asked a question by a lady. She said, you know, our fathers worship on this mountain and your fathers worship on that mountain. Where do the true worshipers worship? And Jesus said this: the true worshipers worship in spirit and in truth. And so it's very important for us to worship both in spirit and in truth. Now, what does that mean to worship in spirit? Well, first of all, our worship for God comes from His love for us. You see, it's not that we first love God, but it's that God first loved us. And you see, our worship is something that happens because of the grace that has been placed in our hearts, because Jesus Christ has come into our hearts and lives. Jesus said, you must be born of the Spirit. And that new birth, you know, you can't birth yourself physically. You know, that comes from somewhere else. And so this birth, this spiritual birth, comes from God. When you put your faith in Jesus, when you trust in what He's done, His love, His grace, His mercy for you, when you trust in Jesus, put your faith in Him, a miracle takes place on the inside. You are born spiritually. There is a spiritual birth that takes place. Now, what we're to do is, because that Spirit, the Spirit of God, is living in us, we need to learn to worship from that Spirit, not from the flesh, not just from singing some songs, saying amen, but from the deepest part of ourselves, to allow the Spirit of God to rise up within us to say, I love you, Lord. I worship you, Lord. You are my Lord and my God. Oh, I tell you, when you learn to worship in that way, we'll quit arguing about what style of worship or what method of worship is best. And we just begin to learn to worship from the deepest parts of our hearts. Worship in spirit.